Well, here we get the enjoyment of watching another without history video. This one's about 12 minutes long in this video, so I'm going to stretch it out to 45 or so whenever I put my input in, but it's asking the question, did Africans create the Olympic Games? And watch the hoops that they try to jump through, no pun intended with the Olympic rings. But let's see what hoops he tries to run through here. Here we see a recent sub-Saharan primitive wearing new clothing and even earbuds in and all those type of things. Of course, they end up getting trainers. Quite often they're Caucasians too, and if they're not, they've all been taught by that, and they learn how to actually train somebody for certain events and all these things. But let's just get into how they try to flip it around to where it might have been sub-Saharan African somehow. Ancient African sports, a tale of endurance. I have to mention that only a few events are really about endurance. One which is real famous is the endurance running marathon. Now, that was done by Greeks. There was an actual man that ran between two cities to tell the other city this one's being attacked, and it ended up saving them all. By the way, that man died shortly after he made it there and told them what was going on. He had run himself to the nth degree and couldn't take it anymore. Seemingly his heart gave out and so on. But we still run that today and everything. And of course, if people are well trained and doing it all the time, they can make a much better time than he did and not even pass away. It's been a long time since runners have passed away from doing such, but let's see what he's got to start with.
As he performs his laps, the cheers from the crowds get louder. They had all seen the boy before, but never had he been displaying such strength and endurance. Now, on his final lap, the cheers have now become roars of joys and admiration. The year is 1386 BC, and the boy is none other than Amenhotep III.
Now, this is whenever, after 30 years of reign, they actually have to do a Hebshed festival where they actually run around a track here, and it in a way proves that they're still virile and still able to do things. Of course, at a certain point here, of course, all these young runners who train to do this so much versus a pharaoh that's not doing so will end up outrunning him. And a lot of people have made the comments that they would slow down or they would allow him to finish and run along with him and then praise him openly, pick him up on his shoulders, if he could just end up completing the thing. You can tell the Caucasian phenotype of these people, but of course blacks trying to claim it, want to claim anything, and their favorite thing is to find some statue just like this with the nose knocked off and then pretend that it somehow had a Negroid type nose versus all the other statues of the same pharaoh showing you that they didn't. And of course now we have genetics that have looked all through this and proven the fact that the genetics of the ancient Egyptians were a Caucasian people. All cranial data and so on points out to being a Nordic ruling type and hierarchy of nobility over a big swath of Mediterranean type people and North African type people such as the Berbers and things like that. It's where we get the haplotypes that are shown there. But they don't want to hear that, definitely, because that leaves them out of a situation that they were never a part of in any way. And so jealously they tried to say, we were this, we were that, and today's is, we was the Olympics.
And he had just completed his hectic marathon, a recoronation of sorts, where the pharaoh affirms his physical and mental fitness to rule by participating in the yearly sportive festival. This was one of the many occasions where the pharaoh would join the professional athletes and participate in the games, and Amenhotep III was particularly fond of this.
Now, they only had a few games they went with. They'd have an archery competition, and usually the one that wins the archery competition is not the one that would win the running race and so on. And people can really understand that. So if somebody was able to win more than one or two, like Hercules back in the day, supposedly won 6 events out of the 8 that they were going to do in the whole thing, and things like that. That made a big difference, where this man dominated so much, he wasn't just one event. Let's continue.
So, who invented the sports that we know today?
Well, where was the first sub-Saharan African allowed to even be in these games or invited to the games in the first place? Well, it wasn't at its inception. And so if you haven't realized it yet, what we're realizing is that they're trying to claim we was Egyptians, and Egyptians did this thing, therefore we did this thing, and the Olympics aren't the Greek Olympic Games named after Mount Olympus and everything that everyone knows. And it's really all about black people, the ones that didn't even know Egypt existed. Isn't that strange and self-exposing? Let's continue.
Where did the concept of Olympic Games come from? How old exactly are hockey, fencing, and gymnastics? If you like this type of long format content, leave a comment.
If you like my long format debunks on this, leave a comment saying you like my debunks on it, showing you the truth of everything. And again, I always do this raw. You'll hear me misspeak sometimes or so on. I'm not going to try to edit out all of that. I'm just doing this free form here off my current knowledge. Diodorus Siculus said that the Egyptians were the first to institute games and contests of strength and swiftness, ordaining prize for the victors in several competitions. Does this predate the Olympic Games? Well, in no way. And the Olympic Games were something different. This, of course, honors the gods. It has to do with Mount Olympus and so on. And so we know that the Olympic Games are hooked up to that and those people, but they want to act like, oh, they stole it somehow, as if there was no competition in Greece during the same time of people having foot races or strength competitions about picking up and carrying certain things, ordaining prize for the victors even somehow in the several competitions. So this is a Caucasian type thing, the Egyptians, the Greeks, and others. And once it got going pretty good, others found out about it, even visited during those times and wondered if, can we be part of these games? And so they were allowed to be part of these games. Again, though, there's no sub-Saharans that are even involved in any of these games. They're really unknown at this time. Egypt has a decree that they're not allowed to go through Egypt, surely not past and out and head towards Greece, but in reality, they didn't even know Greece existed at this time. But they want to pretend all kinds of things, like somebody stole something from them. It's another one of the victim mentalities they try to prove. But if you look at my videos on cargo cult, it'll show you how in their mentality they can't realize that there was anybody more advanced than them somehow. So how they got more advanced, which is very self-telling, is they stole all the stuff from our ancestors whenever they have no record of it ever or anything. They're just coveting real bad and desperately want something that's not theirs. Then whenever they try to make that issue theirs, they're actively trying to steal and lying, which is pretty much what they've turned themselves into with all the lies that they've been telling about just about anything that's available. I mean, after all, we just had one about potato chips and trying to claim that somehow, which predates them by many decades. Well, peanut butter and so on like that. But here we was Olympics, Mount Olympus. That's pretty far away from sub-Saharan Africa that didn't even know the rest of the world existed, isn't it? That's strange. Let's continue. Of course, swimming is quite an issue with them. So any of these Summer Olympic Games that end up having all of these swimming and diving and all those type of things, rarely will you actually, even to this day, see black people that are involved in it. They have been taught how to swim and so on like that, but it's just not their forte. Their only forte in these hundreds of games that there are at each event, whether it's Winter or Summer Olympics, is really just track and field, and only certain ones in that. versus all the other things that you would think that they're supposed to be good at, and they keep claiming they are, like archery, weightlifting, spear throwing, javelin, if you will, and a lot of others. They don't seem to ever even place. They don't even have records over time of doing that, which is again strangely and very telling.
It is often wrongly assumed that the Greeks invented the concept of the Olympic Games, along
The Greeks invented the Olympic Games, or they wouldn't be called the Olympic Games. How foolish can you be to sit here and act like it doesn't have connections exactly to Olympus and the games that they held? But he can't keep his fingers out the cookie jar. Here we go.
along with the sports that were enjoyed during these events. We now know that Africans in Kemet, all the way back in the 3rd millennium BC, were already enjoying the majority of these sports. Egypt.
We wouldn't say the majority of them in any way. He would try to say majority, but this minority of people didn't even know any of these games existed. And at first, of course, the Olympics didn't have the hundreds of competitions that we have today, and modern things like golf, it didn't exist. All these things that didn't exist, but they did have discus throwing, all kinds of things, and chariot races that use horses, of course, and things like that, and wheels, and so on. And strangely, that stadia there is actually 1/8 of a mile around. And it has to do with the measurement of the circumference of the earth and other things that I showed in sacred geometry videos. But that's neither for here nor there. But in the idea of that circuit that's there, just like the circus, the circuit that's there is actually a microcosm of running all the way around the world, or if you have the chariots, going all the way around the world with your chariot.
Egyptologist Toby Wilkinson notes that energetic and physical pursuits played a particularly important part in the education of future leaders. Running, jumping, swimming, rowing, and wrestling were all part of the weekly routine, designed to develop strength, stamina, and team spirit.
He's talking about the Caucasian Egyptians now, and I'm guessing he wants to pretend that nobody else lifted anything or did anything along this nature, but we find out exactly the opposite. The Olympic Games, and there are other games that weren't the Olympics, which became held every 4 years, and then 2 years later the winter, and then summer, winter, summer, and that's our now common one. But these Olympic Games started, just a little after 800 AD. But they had been going on for many generations before this time, before they became solidated into this concept. And just because the Egyptians are doing some of the same types of things, or they have this festival of Pharaoh, doesn't connect to the idea of the Olympic Games, because nobody's taking a man that's been ruling over 30 years and making him run in any of these things. It's pretty easy to see through most of these things, but let's continue.
Dr. Douglas Brewer and Emily Teeter state in their book, Sports and Society in Ancient Egypt, that the ancient Egyptians had a great respect for rules and fair play. Referees were appointed to ensure that the competitions were conducted fairly, and penalties.
So you weren't allowed to cheat. So this is reason number 174 that blacks didn't invent the Olympics or even have anything to do with them, because let's just leave it there. Ooh, this is Hatshepsut.
Were imposed on those who broke the rules. The winners of the competitions were honored and celebrated, while the losers were respected for their efforts. Crowd support was also an important part of ancient Egyptian sports. Spectators would cheer for their favorite athletes and teams, and this helped to create a festive and supportive atmosphere.
Yes, something definitely associated with Caucasians, along with what's going to be shown right here.
Overall, sports were an important part of ancient Egyptian society, and they helped to promote physical fitness, fair play, and social cohesion.
Sounds like Caucasians, doesn't it? Then you see this long skinny boat here that's done for boat racing, whether it's a single or done in a team fashion. This is also from Caucasians and everything. How fast can we go on this canoe type of idea? Well, we're going to find that that helps make canoes that are a whole lot faster and things like that for people to use. So not only does this, help out the health of everybody and come about with these game concepts that go on and help the morale of all the people and something to look forward and all of that, but it also, in every aspect, whether it be the bow, for archery and so on, boats like these, even footwear, where a lot of these people were trying to wear sandals, and quite often during these runs, those sandals would start tearing apart, and so a lot of people ran shoeless. In fact, the first Olympic Games, and all really of gymnastics, used to be done in the nude. It started out because one guy loosed his material, knowing that that's kind of a windbreaker stopping him down, and it was easier for him to run, and then of course he won it, so others later got the same idea, and they do gymnastics nude, so why not care?
Winning athletes were celebrated as heroes, and it was a propaganda opportunity to represent one's home.
see what's going to happen. This would be interesting to see if infinite movement too. Would you just have one person go down and collect all the... I guess everyone, okay, let's not hear the rules, let's just play. Everyone just roll. You get a 6. Wait, you have to be careful to not go too far. Wait, no, that's me. So I roll, I get just a 3. That means I don't make it at all even. Okay, what's next? A 5, okay. And Yoshi gets also a 3. Okay, so Yoshi and I are at the same spot. We get nothing. Those guys get some stars. Now what? How many times do we get to roll? If you go too far, do you fall off? When does the minigame end? I wonder when the minigame ends. Okay, this guy gets just a 1. Let's roll.